What up, y'all? So let's get into day one of the Diddy trial. Now, for anybody that's been following me, I've always said that this case is very small and not as big and as elaborate as people thought it was going to be. Not all these crazy celebrities involved. Y'all was doing too much. But what I can say is today, with the first two witnesses, this is going to be an interesting uphill battle for the prosecution, and I don't think this is a slam dunk. Man, Diddy got 8 lawyers sitting over there trying to get him up out of this. The prosecution is going to have to find a way to get this jury to understand the difference between domestic violence and racketeering, and it's going to be tough because right now the lines are extremely blurred, and right now Cassie is being painted as the person who's setting up all these intimate situations. But let's take a look at opening statements. We're going to do the Cliff Notes version of it. So the prosecution opened up like, this is Sean Combs. To the public, he was a businessman, larger than life icon, but you'll hear about his other side. 20 years of him kidnapping, arson, party favors, crimes of intimacy. He was so jealous of Cassie. If he found out she was seeing other men, he would brutalize her, threaten her, and say, you'll never have a career. I'll release these tapes of you and the escorts. He had a business and relied on his bodyguards, chief of staffs to help him kidnap people, blow up cars, and dangle people off balconies. This is not about a freaky lifestyle. This is about a criminal who coerced and used violence. Now, mind y'all, this is Maureen Comey. This is her opening statements. Not word for word. I'm putting a little spin on it, but for the most part, this is what she's saying. He made these women, including Cassie, do his dirty work, call the escorts, pay the escorts, so his hands could stay clean. And it wasn't just Cassie. We have a Jane Doe who he met in 2020. He introduced her to the freak-offs and brutalized her too. So you'll be hearing from Cassie and Jane Doe, and you'll also hear from his employees and personal assistants like Mia, who he also assaulted. You'll hear from the employee he forced into a SUV with a gun. Now this sounds like Don Richards, you know what I'm saying? That definitely sounds like Don. You'll also hear from the chief of staff. So that's essentially how the opening went. Next up, we have Teeny Garagos. Now she steps up for Diddy. She's gonna be doing his opening. Now this is a smart move. This is chess. I like this. So the feds let Maureen Comey do the opening. Diddy's team, even though they have strong male attorneys, they said, hey man, let Teeny Garagos get up there and get busy. Let her go to work. So you got 2 powerhouse women lawyers fighting for their peoples. So Teeny steps up, looks at Diddy and says, this is Sean Combs. Now reports are saying that he stands up kind of weak. You know, he looks a little defeated. We know Diddy putting a sauce on it. But yeah, let's get back to Teeny. She says, this is Sean Combs. He's fascinating. People want to be around him. He's magnetic. This is a case about money, love, and jealousy. This case is not racketeering. This is a case about Sean Combs' private bedroom life. The government has no business in this man's bedroom. He has a temper. He gets violent. We own that. But domestic violence is not trafficking. Hey, yo, Teeny Garagos was like, hey, yo, he be beating these women up, but it ain't trafficking. Crazy, but it's smart because I always tell people, don't run away from the truth or confrontation. Address it head on. This man is violent. He's mean. He's nasty, but he's not a trafficker. That's essentially what she's saying. All right, let's get back into Teeny. She says, Diddy had a lot of women. He was never going to marry anybody. He always kept a group of women around him, and that made all these women jealous. All these women were in multi-year relationships just wanting his love and attention. They were not forced to be here. Cassie, for example, she was with him forever, over 11 years, but she was never gonna be the one. Sean loved Kim Porter, the mother of his children, the love of his life, his soulmate. Cassie was never gonna be her, and when she realized that, she walked away freely. Look, I ain't gonna flex. Teeny Garagos is cooking with this opening, okay? Now, I don't like that Diddy is using Kim Porter to save his life after he brutalized that woman for all these years, after he flaunted all these women in her face. That woman is in her grave, and you're using her as a defense to save your life. This is crazy. This is nasty work. He said Kim Porter was the love of his life. This is wildness. All right, back to the defense. Teeny says Cassie was jealous. She wanted to be a wife, and it was never going to happen. When Cassie wanted to leave, she left, married the trainer, and is pregnant with his 3rd child. Now, this is actually smart because they're taking the power away from the feds. Because if I'm the feds, I'm going to paint the story that Cassie was this 19-year-old girl who was enamored with this superstar. She never wanted freak-offs. She wanted to be a wife. Diddy used and abused her, and when she finally left, she became a wife and a mother because she never was into that swingers lifestyle. That's what I would say if I was the feds. But now Diddy's team has taken that away and claimed it and said, listen, she always wanted to be a wife. As soon as she left, she became one. So yo, these two teams, they are boxing, they are jabbing, they are hitting each other. All right, so let's get to the first witness, which was the security guard at the hotel of the infamous Diddy and Cassie video. His name is Mr. Flores. He said he came up to the 6th floor because he got a call that there was a woman in distress. And when he gets there, he sees Cassie and Diddy. He said Diddy is kind of like pacing back and forth, visibly upset. He said, I told him like, look, y'all got to take this back into the room. This vase that you broke, Diddy, you got to pay for that, my boy. He said Cassie was like, yo, I just want my bag and my phone so I can go. He said Diddy told her, you ain't going nowhere. He then said Diddy pulled out a stack of money like, hey, don't tell nobody. He said he told Diddy, I don't want your money. The damage that you caused, it's going to be charged to the room. You ain't got to give me no cash. He said he went downstairs, recorded the video on his phone so he could show his wife when he got back home. And then 2 days later, when he came back to work, the video was gone. It was completely wiped from the server. But he was able to record it before he left. So Diddy's lawyer, Brian Steele, Young Thug's lawyer, gets up and was like, you said when you got off of the elevator, Diddy was looking mean. Why you say that? He said, well, that's my opinion. Brian said, did he attack you? He was like, nope. Brian said, you told these people that Diddy told Cassie she wasn't leaving and going nowhere, right? Your incident report didn't say that, right? He was like, no, I didn't write that down. Brian was like, so it wasn't important to write it down 9 years ago, but now you want to talk about it today like it's really important. The feds was like, objection. Yo, they was going crazy. Brian was like, I. You said Diddy offered you a bribe, right? But didn't you just tell him that he had to pay for the vase that he broke? He was like, yeah. Brian was like, and you also said that you saw another man in the room. The security guard was like, yep. He was on the pull-out bed. Brian was like, these security cameras, they're motion sensitive, right? So there may be gaps. The security was like, yeah. Brian was like, no further questions. So what's happening right now is Brian is setting the play up that the cameras may not have caught everything, so we don't know what Diddy and Cassie had going on. Next up, they call the escort in. So I'm just going to summarize this story for y'all. This guy essentially was not like an escort. Cassie called up their business one night and was like, look, I'm looking for, a black man dancer for a bachelorette party. He was like, all right, I'm about to go down, do this little stripper dance, get this money, and get up out of here. He said when he got to the hotel, it was just Cassie and Astroglide, and everything was already set up and ready to go. He said there was a man on the far side of the room with a robe on, a hat, and a bandana. And he said Cassie was like, yo, that's my husband. He ain't gay. He just gonna sit and watch us. The escort was like, when he heard the voice, he knew it was Diddy. He said, so him and Cassie, they did their little thing. It was kind of quick. She gave him some money, so he left. And by the time he got downstairs, she was texting him like, yo, can you send me a picture? I want you to come back up. So in his mind, he was like, yeah, I'm about to go back up here and get this money. And pretty much what happened, all three of them developed this situationship where he would be their little worker to come in and, do some intimate things with them. But then he started noticing that sometimes when he got there, Cassie would be passed out on dope. Probably other men had already been there. And then he would just be sitting there. And sometimes Diddy would be putting his hands on Cassie. And after a while, he was like, yo, you need to leave him. I can't keep coming to do this while he beating on you. To me, it sounded like he started to catch feelings, a little bit for Cassie because he was wanting her to leave and get up out of that situation. Diddy's lawyers got up and was like, yo, who called you? He was like, Cassie. Who paid you? Cassie. Then Diddy's lawyers was like, were you a prostitute? He was like, no, we was just a company that sent men out for striptease or just to hang out with women. And that's pretty much how the day ended. So what Diddy's lawyers are doing a good job at is setting the stage that Diddy wasn't the one doing none of this. Cassie was calling the workers. Cassie was paying the money. And this man in particular was not an escort. So that's setting the foundation that Diddy wasn't paying for escorts. This man in particular was just a male dancer. So that's pulling Diddy off of the transportation or prostitution charge because this guy is saying, I'm not a prostitute. He's also laying the foundation that Cassie was doing everything, not Diddy. But this is why this is a RICO case, because mob bosses back in the day, would be sitting in the penthouse and they would have guys out in the streets doing all they dirty works so the feds could never get the mob boss because technically he was never putting his hands on anything. So they created the RICO statute, which means they're going to say Diddy is the mob boss and Cassie and the bodyguards and the assistants and the escorts, they were all acting on behalf of him, the boss. That is why this is a RICO case. They're going to say he was intentionally not putting his hands on a lot of this stuff so he didn't get caught up. He had other people doing it, and that is why he is essentially the mob boss or the leader of this organization. Whew, what a wild day one. So Cassie is set to take the stand sometime this week. Her husband was there today. I suspect Don Richards will be on that stand, and she will talk about her own violence, and then she will tell everybody about Cassie's violence. But based off of everything we heard, who do y'all think is winning this case so far? Leave your comments below. Peace.